I got my individual camera on. Take a look at my face.
Yeah, we might be able to join the phone.
Hello, everybody.
Oh yeah, we can have the phone call in. There, that's. Then in that case, I can mute my stuff.
Why did it kick off and say the live? Okay, we'll continue in a moment. Hopefully everyone can hear us. Apologies for not making any strides on the Teams call since last month. Haven't had a chance to look at other options quite yet, but for the time being, just know if you publish over here to the right, we will be getting the new questions here, and our flow is to immediately publish them and then to go to the publishing tab to make sure that our replies are public so that we can say, hey, we're starting right now. So again, apologies for that, but we will be looking into more options in the future. And it's possible, we didn't really prep him, so I'm putting him on the spot here, but Tyler may have magically figured out how to simulcast this to Twitch as well. So Tyler, if you're there, just yeah, feel free to do that and back channel the questions to us here in the chat. Steve, you okay?
Hold on, give me one more 30 minutes or 30 seconds, sorry.
In the meantime, I'm gonna get the notes set up here. So we've got the PowerShell community call today.
If that's gonna work, we're just gonna have to do it individually. All right, we're just gonna individually call in.
I'm sorry.
Wait. Hey, Joey.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're as good as we're gonna get.
Yeah, there's no. You are not able to talk, unfortunately. Looking at how to fix it. Okay, so we're gonna hop in here. We've got some new blogs coming out, or that's come out. Both. We've got some new RFCs. We'll provide an update on PowerShell 7. What's happening there? Actually, we'll just go ahead and start with that.
Wait, hold on. Other people aren't seeing your screen. You guys can't see. I can see it.
I can see the Teams meeting.
Oh, so there's a 10 to 20 second delay. You're a presenter, Steve, so it's going to be just slightly behind.
All right, Sean, are you able to see it?
No.
Can we ask, is anyone else able to see it? There's a new message.
I can see it.
I'm looking for someone outside. Can someone not on the PowerShell team confirm they can see Joey's desktop?
I mean, unless this live event red square is lying to me.
No, I see that too, but again, I have special privilege here.
Yeah, I got no.
All right, getting some messages coming.
I see Steve typing in VS Code. Well, it's Joey typing in VS Code, but that's good enough, Joel.
Yep. All right, so Joel confirms.
Publish. Okay, I can see the screen share. Yes. Yes. Okay, thank you, everybody. Yeah, I think that's just you, Joel.
Okay, so Joe, I do want to make sure that you bring up that we do have that issue open RFC repo, and people have been commenting on it for maybe some questions that we can cover after the agenda items.
Oh, we have the issue open in the RFC repo that is, I actually didn't know that we did this. So we were preloading questions.
I gotta watch my Twitter, man.
I guess I do.
There's not a ton of stuff there, but it's something I want to just give a heads up to community so they can preload with some questions. But
yeah, let's.
A lot of it's actually feature asks and not questions per se.
That's fine. We'll promote this more heavily in the next one using the PowerShell team account. My apologies, I didn't know that we did this, but we'll go through this here at the end and make sure we address all these. So thank you everybody that filled those in. Okay, so update on PowerShell 7. We'll just get right into it. PowerShell 7 first preview I believe, Steve, is coming out next week. That's correct?
Unless anything goes wrong, yes, the expectation is it will come out next week. Probably towards the end of the week as usual, like around Thursday. Usually that's when the bits go out. Along the same lines with the release, I will have a blog post to cover some aspects of the roadmap. So that's something that we had promised a while back. So expect that to coincide with the Preview 1 release.
Awesome. So is there anything we say that people can do today with the preview, given that the move to Net Core 3? Like, will a bunch of these types just work for them, or we have some work to do there?
No, so with the Preview 1, I mean, like basically the what will be part of that release is all the changes happened since the 6.2 GA. So there's been a bunch of other pull requests that we've immersed in. Net Core 3.0, we haven't done anything yet to kind of leverage that, but all the new types will be there, and which also means that in your scripts you can now use WPF and WinForms. I haven't played with it myself, but I guess that's where we'll get some feedback. Outgrid view will not be part of the first Preview 1. So set expectation on that one.
Awesome. So yeah, we're also, like as Steve said, there were a bunch of PRs that didn't make the cut for 6.2. So a lot of that stuff's going to be in there. This is sort of our first windfall of new features that had been coming in right after the 6.2 release lockdown. I do want to call out the .NET 5 blog post. I think everybody should give that a read. Basically they're going to be doing something very similar to us. In that they will be dropping core from the name and sort of merging the whole family, skipping forward from 3 to 5 to avoid confusion with .NET Framework. I'm just going to copy this link. Yep. So, this unclear right now whether this means that that .NET will actually be shipping in Windows. They're going to move to an annual life cycle where they sort of do .NET 5, .NET 6, .NET 7 every year, and every other year is an LTS release. So we still haven't completely rationalized, our forward-looking sort of post 7.0 in this .NET 5 Brave New World. But we'll certainly be working with the .NET team over the course of the next few months to understand how we should align. And make sure that you guys are getting all the latest and greatest without too much churn. So just keep your eyes peeled there. Do you have anything to add there, Steve?
Nope.
Cool. I believe we had a couple other blogs that got published in the last month.
Are you talking about us?
I look real quick. Yep. Unfortunately, for some reason, when I'm logged into dev blogs, it loads really slowly for me. Oh yeah, of
that
course.
happens to me too.
So so this was a big one. I'm not sure if this we discussed this at the previous call that was actually published the day of. So definitely check this one out that Rob published on using the PS Script Analyzer to check for PowerShell version compatibility. This is a really big deal. Basically, it's a series of rules inside of Script Analyzer, along with some catalogs that will allow you to know, or at least get a sort of best guess at what in your module is incompatible or your script is incompatible, given that you're targeting a specific version of PowerShell, an addition to PowerShell, or an OS platform. So you basically can specify, hey, I want to make sure I'm compatible on PowerShell 5 and 6 across Windows, Mac, and Linux, and you'll get nice little squigglies that are going to warn you when you try to use types that are outside those bounds or commandlets that are incompatible. We're going to be expanding this over time to include commandlets that we don't just own. We're going to add support for some suggestion messages for cases where we think the fix is very easy, like moving from get WMyObject to get some instance. And so we're hoping that it really makes it a lot easier for people who have written script modules or scripts to move forward to 6 and also to maintain backwards compatibility where they care about it. So I would highly recommend checking out that blog post. It's pretty comprehensive. Additionally, we published the public preview of PowerShell and Azure Functions. So this is something the PowerShell team's been spending a good chunk of time on in the last 6 to 9 months, which is making sure that the Azure Functions worker for PowerShell is very native to PowerShell and sort of fits with the way that our more general programming model works. For those unfamiliar with Azure Functions, it's very similar to AWS Lambda or GCP Cloud Run. The idea being that you get a nice little box to write code into, or write the code on your local machine, and then you deploy that up to the cloud where it is run based on some trigger, whether that's an HTTP webhook or a scheduled timer, or some other event happening in Azure space or through some other third-party API. So we're really excited about that. We are beginning to wrap up our level investment in that thing. So we've been sort of taking the lead in implementing it, and going forward, we're going to begin handing this back off to the Azure Functions team so that we can get back to doing core PowerShell work. But we're still going to be there as advisors and helping guide the process through to GA. But definitely, we've already built some really cool stuff with Azure Functions. I think we have 2 bots at this point, one for our internal teams channel and another for GitHub PoshChan that Steve has built along with some other members of the team, and is really easy and is giving us some very useful functionality for very low cost just with PowerShell. So we're gonna have, I think, Steve, you're still planning on doing a blog post talking about PoshChan and sort of how you built that.
Yes, eventually. I think first I'm going to have a talk about it in detail at a PowerShell Conference EU, and probably right after that I'll have a series of blog posts.
Awesome. Which brings me to a good next point. I will say events. We are going to PowerShell Conference EU. That is the first week of June. So starting here on the 4th through the 7th. So we're really excited to see those of you that are out there. And I think I'm going to be in town as well in Copenhagen a day early for a user group out there that I will post the link to in the notes before I publish them. But are there, Sydney, do you know of any other events like right around the corner that might be happening we want to talk about?
We had a build last week, but that's passed. I think aside from that, besides PSConf EU, is PSConf Asia sort of on the horizon now, about 6 months out.
I think it's in September?
Yep, September 19th through 21st, I want to say.
21st, okay. Yeah, so that one is in, I believe, Bangalore this year?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely check that one out. We're sending a bunch of people from the PowerShell team to that as well. And so, lots of good talks will be coming down the pipeline. I do want to check on the new. So John says he can see the presentation, just had to rejoin. Can confirm everybody sees my screen. That's awesome. See the play button, but is unresponsive. Sorry, everybody. Hopefully you've been able to get through. Had to rejoin. Yep. Christoph Bergmeister has an example of the PSSA compatibility rules. Is anyone able to hit publish? My publish button stopped working.
Yeah, mine stopped working too.
Great. Maybe there's some sort of spam. Oh, there you go.
Great. Now it says no new questions. Did you just bulk do something?
I clicked all of them and then they all published.
Oh. So
they're there. If you want to go through and clean up the ones that are sort of useless, just so we actually have a clean slate here, that'd be awesome as I go.
The ACK ones?
Yeah, just like ACK ones we don't need. Like,
okay, I can get rid of those.
I mean, stuff like I want to highlight like Christoph's, demo here, and make sure everybody's seeing that first and foremost. Awesome. So we also had some RFCs get published that are new here. One of the big ones that I highly encourage everyone to check out is a for each parallel built into the language itself. So this would be using similar to the thread jobs module that we already ship, but it would be a native part of the language. This was something.
One clarification, because you keep saying language. I think for me that means a very specific thing. I think we moved away from having it as part of the for each statement, and the committee meeting last night agreed that it should probably be part of the for each object commandlet, but it would be part of PowerShell is the point.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of consider for each parallel part of our language, even if it's not technically a keyword. But yeah, in any case, we want to make it a native aspect of PowerShell to achieve something very similar to what we had in workflow, but generically across PowerShell. And so, there's a lot of good conversation happening around this one. So if you care about parallelism or concurrency, definitely check this one out.
So let me just add one quick thing, because I want to make sure people don't misunderstand what's happening with that RFC. It's like today PowerShell does have concurrency. You can do threading, you can do additional processes through a regular PS job. This is making it easier for folks who don't want to manage threads or manage thread jobs, so they can get very simple concurrency where they don't need complexity in terms of managing all that stuff. So this is one of the primary reasons we've heard that people use PowerShell workflow. So we're trying to bring this back so that those people who are dependent on workflow for this can use it within PowerShell itself.
Use it on platforms where workflows don't exist.
Yeah.
Awesome. So additionally, we had a very good conversation around test connection. So this is one I have not had a chance to read yet that Joel wrote based on some committee decisions, kind of nuanced, that we made around the test connection commandlet. We sort of published one that slightly maybe preempted our enforcement of RFC policy, and not that the test connection commandlet we took in was bad by any means, but we did want it to be a little bit more consistent with the existing Windows PowerShell implementation, despite the fact that we wanted something to be cross-platform. The old one went through WMI, and so there was sort of some trade-offs that we had to discuss in approaching that original experience, but I think ultimately, this RFC should reflect an experience that is much closer to what we already have in Windows PowerShell. So if you care about network diagnosability, check out the test connection RFC. You anything there, Steve?
No, I mean, I'll just highlight again, like, we really appreciate Ilya doing the work to make it cross-platform. I think the feedback, which is completely appropriate, and we apologize for missing this when it first went in, is that it wasn't a great PowerShell-y experience. And that's what we're trying to address here and make it back to what we think is the correct thing, which is the Windows PowerShell experience. So.
Yep. We've also got this one draft to enable PWSH to be used as a login shell. This is the one, Steve, that's actually just. Oh, I haven't read this one yet either. This is not just adding the -L switch.
No, that's
actually
adding a -L already is merged in, so that will show up in preview one. This is doing more to make it more of a login shell.
Yeah, so essentially, I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here, but basically a login shell in Linux is, or I'll say in StarNix or something like that. The idea here is that these are shells that start before any other shells, right? So if I execute a fully a non-child process, is that the technical like a new parent process?
Hold on, Jim was making that face.
Yep. No, I think Jim.
He came from Unix space and he doesn't. I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is. Doesn't like exactly.
I'm trying to explain it in like not super technical terms, but if Jim wants to chime in and give his take on that, that'd be great.
Login shells set up an initial environment for the user. Non-login shells do not.
So non-login shells
are a great succinct example or summary. So yeah, so the idea here is that like when you're not a login shell, like if I open a terminal on Mac OS and I start PowerShell, I inherit all the environment variables from the bash environment that was already started. And at some point that bash was started at a login shell. or as a login shell, which meant that it called a special profile that initialized the environment by setting up certain environment variables that were present in like a special login shell profile. We want to make sure that we respect the initial environment setup of the given environment, but very often these setup scripts are non-trivial bash scripts that get that initialize the environment. So what we're proposing here, and we've yet to determine the sort of performance impact of this, but basically we're going to, if you start PowerShell core with this -L switch, we will spin up an instance of bash, initialize the environment, and then sort of hand that environment to PowerShell core as it starts, so that it has all of the sort of environment variables and other environment information that would be present if you were to start PowerShell from another bash process that had already started as a login shell. Yeah, great question on the Windows terminal. I will definitely add it to the agenda here.
Where did you see that?
So continuing down the list, this is just one that I need Steve to merge for RFC to final.
Oh, okay.
This is probably not as interesting for a lot of people. This is a module that will help us in interacting with the RFC repo. So we've had some trouble just keeping track of the numbers as we merge them and how many final we have and that sort of thing. And so this is a module that Jim wrote to help us out there. And it looks like we've got one more from Ilya around some enhancements to culture and comparison parameters. This one I'm actually not too familiar with. Does anybody on the call able to speak to this one? I think
this is just to bring some consistency across a bunch of command lists where culture matters, which is really about string stuff.
Cool. I will definitely, we'll give this one a read and maybe throw it on our next RFC meeting internally.
I think the focus was on get content, set content, type of stuff. But anyways, yeah.
Great. Okay, I don't see any new questions right now. Is there anything anybody else in the room before we go into Q&A would like to talk about in their areas? I know I have Sydney in the room. Who else is here?
Who's in the room? Anything on docs you want to talk?
I'm working on a refactoring the WMF docs. There's a lot of redundancy. And I'm just stripping it all out. It's going to be merging 5.0 and 5.1 into a 5x list of stuff. So that's the main thing that's coming. Other than that, we're just working through the issues as best we can, and appreciate any and all help the community wants to provide.
Awesome. Yeah, so I will say as well, this isn't, I have nothing to really report here, but we are still engaging with teams inside of Microsoft around trying to build some sort of unified module documentation pipeline with the goal to make sure that module documentation for stuff that we don't typically own is kept in sync and kept up to date as new commandlets and parameters get added in Windows, Office, and across various Microsoft properties, no different than the way that we handle sort of .NET documentation. So, I don't have an ETA there or any details to report right now, but just know that, we are sort of playing an active role in working with teams outside of our own ownership to help them, get their modules documented at least up to the point that ours are today. So, definitely, just know that we're working hard there.
I just want, before we move on to the other items, so one thing that we haven't kind of talked a lot about, but there's a mini announcement kind of on Twitter, which is we've taken the PS Reline project. So with the beta 4 release that we had last week, we transitioned that repo from Jason to the PowerShell team, my team. Jason will still be actively working on it as a maintainer, but this also means that we can actually apply more of my team resources on that. Like Dombo, for example, will be one of the co-maintainers. So hopefully we can get a little bit more progress on that to get it to a GA quality release, and then we can look at some more interesting things we can do going forward after 2.0.
And I need to talk to you about the docs on that.
Yeah, we will talk about that.
Awesome. So yeah, this does mean that we will be shipping that a 2.0 update into a new version of Windows PowerShell. You know, a lot of what we've been doing too is to address accessibility fixes. We're still working very closely with the accessibility team here at Microsoft to make sure that the PS Readline across all the platforms is fully compatible with screen readers and you know, is fully accessible to folks. So that was some of the motivation for taking over PS Readline, but as Steve said, there's some other innovation we'd like to push, and just having a sort of more frequent release cycle there, I think, is going to be helpful for PowerShell overall. So, okay, no new.
No, I published a bunch of stuff, so
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, it would, if I reply, it becomes private kind of thing.
Yep.
Do you want to maybe pop over to the RC repo?
Yep.
And just see what is preloaded.
Yep. And then we will sort of do the team's questions after that. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So incorporating some long needed fixes improvements into 7, there's quite a few issues that are in an impasse due to the whole deal with breaking changes with a new major version that encompasses almost all the missing WinPS features. Seems like the best possible time to break some eggs to make a great omelet. Also in that vein, plans post PS7 initial release, new features planned on the horizon, general direction of development. I'm all for community driven development. I've seen lots of great ideas and features coming from the community that look like great fun, but I'd love to see a roadmap of what you guys are planning to have done as well. So lots of great stuff in that question. I will address the roadmap aspect first. So as Steve said, he's going to be publishing a roadmap blog roughly with the release of preview.1, which should hopefully be next week. That will contain some sort of feature investigations that we're currently doing that are a little bit larger in scope. And so, you know, Steve, would you be upset here if I maybe just like enumerated some of these just at a very high level, or you want to wait for the blog post to come out there?
No, I mean, we can certainly talk about it. None of them should be a surprise.
Yeah, so I mean, there's for instance some stuff we'd like to you know, figure out how to sort of genericize credential handling, for instance, so that we could plug in different extensions that support credentials or secrets in various ways, and sort of scoop those into PowerShell as a clearinghouse. We would like to do something similar, possibly with logging, where we sort of emit different error messages or alerts to different log streams. So, you know, I could, for instance, redirect from ETW to a text file, or possibly do a cloud service that handles alerts or monitoring or logging. So, you know, again, these are all at a very high level, and I don't want to necessarily get into the nitty gritty on them because we'll have issues and RFCs and all that sort of thing to go along with the blog post. Yeah, we understand that we really weren't doing a lot of feature investment around 6.2. Some of that was because of Azure Functions. Some of that was really to build up our own internal automated infrastructure around testing and releases for PowerShell Core in the open source repo. So, you know, we're sort of repivoting with 7.0 back to, you know, sort of traditional feature development, and we do plan on having you know, some more Microsoft driven feature stuff than we had in 6.2 with 7.0. So totally hear you on that note.
Can I add 2 things here?
Yeah, go for it.
One is related to the release automation. Like the team, that was a focus for the team because we were spending way too much like manual effort getting a release out, and now we have like concurrent releases for servicing 6.1, 6.2, and then getting like a 7 preview out. But I think the team has done a great job so far. We're actually a little bit further ahead than we thought we would be. And once we have something we can share, we're definitely going to have maybe some more blog posts. The code will be open sourced, and we'll probably have some kind of talk at some future conference kind of detailing how the PowerShell team is leveraging PowerShell plus Azure, specifically Azure DevOps, to kind of make ourselves more productive. The other thing related to the roadmap, and you'll see this in the roadmap itself, is like there's a number of outstanding feature requests from the community, like some are like 2, maybe 3 years old, that we're gonna now definitely spend some time investigating and seeing how much we can actually fit into a 7 release. If it doesn't show up in 7.0, hopefully it'll show up in a 7.1 release. So look forward to that.
Awesome. Now to kind of address the breaking changes aspect, I do want to be clear that 7 are still our primary goal. Now that we've sort of made the breaking changes to fit in with Linux as much as we can in 6, is to maintain backwards compatibility with 7 or with 5, excuse me. So we are moving to a new major version, but this isn't to signal that we're making large breaking changes. We may make some tactical breaking changes the same way we did in 6.1 and 6.2. Those are generally speaking, we apply sort of a two-phase bar where we say, hey, how many people is this going to impact? How negatively is it going to impact them? And then, how much benefit is this actually going to give to people in the real world, as opposed to, just applying consistency for consistency's sake. So, we've had that bar for 6.1 and 6.2. We'll continue to apply it, but this isn't a place where we're going to say, hey, this is like a Python 3 style break, where we change a bunch of the semantics of the language or do things that people have traditionally not liked about PowerShell or change them. This is really more about getting to a place where PowerShell is sort of unified under one edition, and that we can begin to transition people off of Windows PowerShell in the future. So again, like push for what you want, and we'll apply that bar, but just know that we're not trying to open the floodgates here. I do want to look, Steve, did you publish anything from anyone that was related to that? Edwin says move closer to the mic. Sorry, Edwin. Hopefully that's better.
Edwin, turn your volume up. Or come to room 66. No, I have nothing to add for that item.
Okay. Bunch of good questions we'll go through after we make it through these here. I'd like to add an update to module manifest to include exporting of enums, classes, etc. Great feature request. Hopefully you filed an issue for it, and we'll definitely take a look at it for 7.
There's an outstanding issue with that the whole classes area is not something that's in focus for 7. It hopefully will be something we can look at for 7.1. It's just that right now there's just too much stuff on the plate to get the 7 release out. So I apologize. I know that's something we've talked about in the past, and I hate deferring it one more time, but that's the reality of getting something out there.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, so he brings up actually a couple of very specific discussion points that's been happening recently on the repo related to the culture thing, literal path. So I think we're just gonna, for me, those are not like features; those are just bugs that we need to fix, and hopefully we'll just continue working with the community on that to get those resolved. Let me see.
Why did we remove code factor?
Oh yeah, so let me address that. We didn't remove code factor. What happened is that GitHub automatically disables what do they call it? Not like extensions, but integrations after a year, and then basically I have to refresh authorizing it. So that's what happened. So basically, GitHub removed it because 1 year expired and it didn't get renewed. So I renewed it yesterday, I think, reauthorized it. So it should be back, I think, already. So that was accidental. It wasn't intentional.
Cool. VNext help system. Yeah, this one is definitely one that's near and dear to my heart that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I don't know that it's going to get addressed in 7.0, but as I said, we're driving a bunch of stuff with this sort of internal pipeline, and that will, end up probably driving some changes in PowerShell itself. So we've yet to determine what that pipeline will necessarily look like, but if changing the help system helps significantly in that regard, we may look at doing that, but I think we also want to drive help still back into Windows PowerShell for those modules that are being updated in Windows. And so, I'm not sure that markdown stuff is going to come until later. And that really is our number one priority is making sure that on the back end, the content's getting revved for the help system. So that's our priority there. But I do, I definitely would love for our system to be pure markdown at some point in the future. New formatting system, a la PS More. Again, if this was community driven, it's something we could look at, but I don't think it's going to make the cut for 7, just given how much work we have on our plate right now.
Let me just add, I think PS More is interesting, but it's really a not even complete incubation project by Jason as a way to revamp the formatting system. If there's a way for him to get further progress on that, I would love to take a look at that and see if we can use that. But right now, I don't believe he's made any additional investments in that right now. So I don't think we can. That's too big right now for us to take on. Going to the next thing, Joel lists out a whole bunch of issues. So I'll just mention, like, you'll see this in the roadmap. Like, there's I think 6 or 7 kind of like feature requests from the community that's been brought up, and the way it was added to the roadmap is really based on the number of thumbs up on there. So these are like the most popular ones, most requested ones. So I think for this long list, the reality is maybe some of these, if the stars align and things happen great, we can maybe fix all the ones we already have on the list and we can take on additional ones. But I would recommend, hey, one, if the community can pick out some of these, that'd be awesome. Otherwise, if you guys can bring more support on these so that it justifies the prioritization of it, then maybe it's something we could look at for 7.1. Just to set expectation on that.
Yeah, just as a general rule, anytime that you guys give us context around, the sort of scenarios that are going to be enabled for you from a feature showing up, it takes it out of the sort of academic realm for us and can drive the prioritization for our own investment. So, that context is always very, very helpful.
I'll just mention one thing that maybe will help make Joel happy is that the last one on those lists, the null conditionals, is on our list. So that's not saying that we're going to implement. We're going to take the time to understand what the implementation would look like and see if we can fit it in. So,
excuse me.
Wake up.
Yes, I know. Slap. So last one here, or last couple. So any thoughts on a screen tmux like feature? So we already addressed the class thing. Screen tmux like feature for PowerShell. I haven't really thought about it that much, to be honest. I'd prefer something that was screen tmux like in Windows.
I would say just use screen tmux, and hopefully the Windows terminal team can port that.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. The difficulty with screen here is that it's a daemon, right? Or tmux as well, or it gets sort of it's daemon at least conceptually. So this thing's always running. Whereas anything that's hosted inside of PowerShell, once you lose that PowerShell run space, you lose that thing. So it's possible that we could implement something where we background PowerShell core and you sort of use it as like a master process that's hosting the screen tmux thing. But I think generally speaking, you want screen tmux like functionality to be as light as possible. And very, very robust and stable, as opposed to loading the whole .NET VM. PowerShell, not like PowerShell crashes all the time, but keeping a run space around for just
never
hosting.
crashes. If it crashes, we need to fix it. But anyways, I think the main thing for me is screen and tmux should be shell agnostic. So we shouldn't have anything that specific into PowerShell. You should be able to have your different screens or different tmux terminals open with different shells in them. That should just happen. So.
Implementation, Windows and it would be different implementations between Windows and Windows.
Correct.
Completely different.
But I think as the Windows console terminal become more Linux-like, maybe there's some way, or at least you could do it through WSL for sure.
I mean, I haven't discussed this with Rich at all, but I would love to drive, and I know they have a ton of work on their plate and in getting the new terminal finished, but I think it would be great to have a feature that like I could just close the terminal and all of those virtual terminals still exist somewhere in the background, where like I'm able to recall them, whether from the command line or from the GUI by sort of reopening that thing. But we'll talk to them about those sorts of things as the terminal development progresses. Kind of a nice segue. I know someone had asked about the new terminal all up. We love it. We're super excited about it. I know that they've been trying to do something like that, for a very long time. And it's going to certainly make our lives a lot easier. I know folks are excited about, silly things too, like emoji, tabs. I was going to say tabs, but that's really not so silly. I'm very excited about tabs from a productivity standpoint. But yeah, we work with that team very closely. They've already added like PowerShell core auto detection logic to the thing that we've already given some feedback on how to revise. and you know, it's just going to keep getting better. So if you guys have any feedback, you know, definitely, I know they have feedback channels for providing that sort of thing, but also feel free if you feel like there's sort of something falling between the gaps in the communication between us and that team. We do know them very well, and they all love PowerShell. So you know, we're going to do our best to make everybody happy here. Yes, regarding terminals and the new console, these should be RGB. I think that's probably just an issue we can file. And then these default background and foreground colors, I actually don't know how those got added or what the API is for those. This is in the old traditional conhost. Yeah, I can ask Rich sort of what's going on there. This was an up for grabs. Oh, you just posted this, I see. Yeah, I mean, I think the North Star here is going to be the new Windows terminal. So I don't know how much it's really worth investing in this at the moment, but you know, depending on the timing there, we'll see if there's something here. But yeah. All right, jumping into the questions here in the call. I'm going to sort of scroll up to give people who had the first sort of questions in. Cool, it's all below here. So we talked about the Windows terminal, PowerShell t-shirts. I don't think anybody right now from Microsoft is working on PowerShell t-shirts, but
Yes.
well, I think Tyler is working with some folks in the community on a design, but I'm not sure that these are going to be Microsoft funded.
I don't think there's
but
funding yet, but hey, if people want to pay for it, it could be community funded. We have a Kickstarter or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's interest. We don't have a formal plan for that, so.
Yeah, but definitely hop on Twitter, join the fun, throw mustaches on me or whatever people are doing nowadays. Working down the line, we only got 15 minutes here. How is the association of login shell setup script scoped? It's not clear to me how it's any different than starting up PWSH with a profile, unless login shells have more profile association scoping mechanisms than what PWSH profiles currently do. So the important part here is that the login shell profile is typically written by the operating system. So Mac OS maintains one that's, you know, on the base system, Ubuntu, Debian, right? They all have their own mechanisms for where that thing lives, what's in it, how they call it, or not how they call it. It's all bash-l. But we don't want to maintain that functionality in sync with the operating system. So we could come up with this like global login shell PowerShell concept. But if we do that, it means we constantly have to be monitoring what changes in the call logic for their bash login shells and mirror it as closely as possible, which is not something we want to sign up to do across these litany of distributions and OSs. So that's kind of why we're trying to hook into the existing channel for how login shells set up the environment on those machines today. Summary commandlets that process strings, for example, select string need to respect culture values. Oh, so he's just commenting on Elia's RFC. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. Will .NET 5 Java interoperability add new features to PowerShell down the line? So I think short answer, unless anybody else wants to take this one, is don't know yet. I think a lot of these Java interop features have been added for Android compatibility, although I think there's some enterprise scenarios there as well. To be honest, I haven't read or discussed the Java interop far beyond what was in the blog post and the Hacker News thread discussion on it. But Steve, do you have any?
No, I mean, like right now, it's not something we're looking at, but certainly, I mean, besides Java, like Python has come up in the community a couple of times where there are some people interested in saying, hey, is there anything work that we can do to make it easier to write commandlets in Python or make it easier to consume PowerShell from Python? I think Java kind of falls in the same, except for me personally, Java is not as interesting as Python these days. So I mean, I think it's going to depend on what are the use cases, what's the need from the community, and what's the number of people who are actually going to use it if we're going to spend effort on it. Otherwise, you know, community can hopefully do some work there.
Well, yeah, and at the very least, yeah, I can imagine some sort of PowerShell module that wraps, you know, those bindings or ships the interop compat assemblies along with it or something like that. But you know, we just don't really know what it looks like yet, and have to investigate a lot more. Nicholas here posted that the Windows Update Provider module contains no documentation and constantly throws an error because they set the help info URI as their docs.microsoft.com link instead of as a link to a updatable help container. And that's exactly the kinds of problems that we're trying to solve with this internal module pipeline. You know, unfortunately, none of these things are a super quick fix, and often finding the, you know, team or owner responsible for that thing is a task in and of itself for me. And so, you know, we're really trying to address these problems systemically because they're just going to keep happening if we don't sort of educate everybody across the board with a centralized sort of onboarding, help onboarding pipeline. So apologies there. I know that red text when you're calling update help is really annoying. It's something that maybe is worth us looking into servicing, just so we're not throwing an error message at least. But you know, we are trying to get these problems fixed even for stuff that we don't own.
Make sure you're just keeping track of time.
Yep. 10:20. No, I mean, I think a lot of these are just comments
Okay.
and shorter questions, so we'll keep it moving here. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk beyond the Q&A?
No. I just want to make sure that we can get through at least most of these questions. I didn't look at all of them.
Okay. Question for packaging a script as an application package with all its dependencies. I don't know that we're looking into that right now. Hopefully there's an issue.
We are not. There is an issue. It's something that's been talked about for some time. It's not on the current roadmap. I know that people want it. Yeah, that's all I can say, I guess.
So regarding releases and such, are we able to get concurrent releases posted to, for example, Chocolatey? I know Darwin, I believe, owns the PowerShell core package for Chocolatey. You know, we try to simulpost to or publish to all the ones that we own. Chocolatey is it's just sort of a slightly weird one for us, given the sort of ownership and you know, I think it's one where we could potentially publish there, but I'm not sure that you know, it's going to provide a whole ton of new value for us versus where we already publish. I don't know if it's something that folks feel very strongly about, we can certainly reopen the discussion. But we sort of made a call a long time ago. We weren't going to publish to that community feed with our official software, and I'm not sure if that's a Microsoft thing or not. I'm not recalling the conversation. But Steve, did you have thoughts there? Anybody else in the room?
No, I mean, like Chocolatey specifically, and I think even for Homebrew, we don't like officially publish there either, although individuals may. I think there's a set that we kind of just rely on the community. I'll just bring up, because it's kind of like a good point for a segue. We are still working on publishing PowerShell Core 6.2 to the Microsoft stores, so that might be an easier way to install onto Windows client boxes.
Yep.
I have no ET on that, by the way.
We're looking at the new GitHub package.
Sean brings up the new announcement from GitHub about their own repository for pretty much everything. We as the PowerShell team are not looking at that as a formal place. I think that our recommendation, if you want to use that, it could replace, for example, MyGet for your nubkegs or other things like that, but that wouldn't be probably an official place that we would publish for public consumption.
Yeah, we may use it at some point. It's more for like build and test artifacts, like Azure DevOps, Azure Pipelines kind of scenario than like an all-up replacement for, you know, the sort of canonical repositories like NPM and PyPy. But I think somebody else in the room is trying to say something.
Yeah, Tyler was mentioning that there's some internal talks about that.
Oh, cool. So Joel says, I don't think a Python 3 style break is a good idea, but yeah, consistency is sometimes in itself a valuable ideal. But yes, it's not always the best route for everything. Glad you're in agreement. Again, we will deal with all of those on a case-by-case basis. No new language features in 7. It's officially the finally catching up with 5.1 release. I wouldn't say that, no. You know, I think like we'd like to get the for each parallel stuff in. You know, there's the null conditional aspect. I think, you know, there's the...
I'll just put this way. I think,
talk about in the roadmap
Joel, I think you will hopefully be happy with some of the stuff that we have on the roadmap for some of the community-asked features, which are language improvements.
Yeah, so I would not make that statement until you see that roadmap blog come out. Yeah, I hear you, Flavian. I'm sorry. You know, we can continue looking at the class stuff as, you know, as a discussion point right now. It's just it's a very heavy area of investment. And again, I think that the number one priority for us right now is getting everyone on the same PowerShell, you know, moving the entire community of Windows PowerShell, which is still, as we know, the vast majority of PowerShell users, onto a platform where they'll actually be able to take advantage of benefits that we put into classes in the future. So, you know, like as much as I just said, you know, yeah, we're putting language features in 7. 7 is still very much a finally catching up with 5.1 release, and at that point, you know, we can have a lot more innovation without sort of being held back by this adoption problem. So, PS More, something like is something I'd love to take a look at. Would love for you to take a look at it, Joel. We're excited about null conditionals. Darwin says, not liking how new native utilities are only forward provided. Tar curl, is the new terminal going to be downloadable for other Windows distros? I actually don't know. Does anyone in the room know if they're going to be taking the Windows terminal down level?
I would suspect probably not, but I think that's a question to Rich Turner and company. You can post to their repo and ask that question. Maybe they'll answer.
I think, yeah, I would definitely pose that to them. I think, you know, some of the problem there is that really, this is distinct from the tar curl thing. I think they're taking advantage of a lot of very new stuff that's been done very far down under the hood in Windows 10 and Server 2019 around like pseudo terminals and that sort of thing. So I don't know that it's possible to take the Windows terminal down level. The tar and curl thing, you know, I would sort of separate that out. I think it's a lot of that just has to do with the idea that, hey, in older versions, like you can get Cygwin, you can get MinGW, you know, tar and curl were added for, I think, a lot of container scenarios, and also to, you know, give everybody tar and curl, but it's a lot of work to take things down level, and so the bar has to be very high for that sort of thing. Would be good to have the PowerShell team interacting with Windows Terminal team. Yes, we definitely are. Cascadia code, or at least Consolis. I didn't know about Cascadia code, but I use Consolis. And yeah, I mean, all the configuration stuff is right now is just a placeholder. They're going to be, you know, adding that. Michael B asked, will PowerShell support the ligatures in terminal? I think, as far as I know, we're just going to support rendering however they render. So if they render ligatures like that, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work.
Yeah, it does work.
Moving your mouse wheel down while hovering over the screen share will turn down the volume. Didn't know that. That's good information. Doesn't work on mine, but good to know. Internal module pipeline. Is any internal efforts at consistency of Microsoft design module quality? SharePoint PMP is a good example of how it can be great. There are quite a lot of modules across the board that are much less nice to work with, unfortunately. We have pockets of this, like, you know, again, this is difficult because of how large the company is. Even just trying to wrangle folks for compatibility's sake or for documentation is a huge, like I really can't understate how difficult it is for me to sort of keep track of modules across the company. And you know, we have pockets of sort of design guidelines. The Azure PowerShell team, for instance, you know, I know there was a lot of criticism years ago around their module design, some of which has still not been able to be addressed for various breaking changes reasons, but in the last couple of years they've done a fantastic job of you know, defining a set of guidelines around how the Azure PowerShell modules should be built, and enforcing those very strongly across all of the Azure services that spin up new modules and new commandlets. So you know, those sorts of things, they're pockets, and we try to, like, you know, work with the Azure PowerShell team, who has like a strong lever on the rest of the teams. But you know, sometimes there are modules that get spun up in pockets that we don't know about, that you know, we can't sort of apply our guidance there. So we'll look at, you know, more ways we can do this as we sort of engage more teams on the documentation front. Kind of makes the opportunity a little easier. You guys set up all kinds of Linux package feeds, but can't manage an upkick feed. Yeah, it's I think the difference here is that, you know, Linux, we're trying to sort of respect the environment as it is, which is why, you know, we're pushing Windows Store. Like we try to use the most official thing that exists on that platform. And so, you know, even for like snaps, for instance, like we prefer actually having, you know, a snap package that's hosted with in the official snap repositories, you know, as opposed to having packages.microsoft.com, but that's not always possible for RPMs or debs and that sort of thing. So, but I hear you, Darwin. Michael B says 1903 and above only. I presume you're talking about the console stuff. As Joel said, yeah, it's built on ConPTY, so it sounds like they've already stated publicly that they can't take it down level.
Hey, Joey, can I pause you for a quick second?
Go for it.
There was a question coming in from Twitch. Someone said that they forgot to ask you about sudo or sudo, depending on how you want to pronounce it. That is something that we know is an issue. It's difficult to solve. We tried it once. We'll continue to look at it. I'm not committing to it to showing up in 7 release.
From a technical perspective, the real problem is impersonation in the thread.
Yeah.
So because in non-Windows platforms, sudo just spawns off a new process, and there's no problem in creating. And since it's a set UID root program, it actually can run anything it wants to, and it's root, and it does whatever it wants. That's not the architecture that PowerShell has. So it makes it incredibly difficult for us to do that. I expect that we could probably do it if PowerShell itself was set UID, but there'd still be problems there. So it's actually a very thorny problem because of our in-process invocation model.
I think the short answer is we all want it. We looked at it. It's very hard.
Okay, lastly, we have format PX. Yep, definitely check that one out. That's another place to investigate. And Windows Terminal's UWP app's probably not, unless Microsoft is taking UWP down level. So just more stuff on that front. Oh, you're publishing these as I okay. More stuff about. Yep, Azure's little AZ Bumble. Windows Terminal still has some shared components with Conhost. They will also reach down level, possibly, but again, I think everything's UWP layered on top of that, and I don't think ConPTY is going down level. Joel's still talking about the formatting system. Any documentation for gotchas? I'm moving from Azure PowerShell function v1 to v2. The programming model is totally different. But it may be a few find and replaces. We'd like to publish a doc on it at some point, so we've got that in our backlog, and I think Tyler, you know, we should add that as definitely a GA blocker as we hand off. But yeah, I mean, we want people to be able to very easily move between these things, because the V1 will not ever be supported. It was in an experimental state, and you know the functions team is really investing in V2 going forward. So yeah, we'll try to get something for you there. Yeah, we've got one more. Any support for system.directory services? I don't know. There's a really good website you can use called, I think, is this it? Hopefully this is it. Yep. APIs of .NET is basically you can search here for something like directory services, and then you can go look at where it's going to be available. So it looks like .NET Core with platform extensions. This is already in. I don't know if that means it's coming in from another NUPKEG with platform extensions.
So but the question is, have that name available? We already ship it even as part of 6.2, maybe even 6.1 had it. I don't recall specifically which version, but we already include that assembly as part of the Windows compatibility pack is where that's coming from.
Yeah, so if I go here, you know, yeah,
we only support
all
it
this
as
is in there.
NET Core supports it. Like, I don't think it's complete for non-Windows, if that's really the question. But
and by the way, for those of you that don't know about Control Space is awesome. Use Control Space for your tab completions.
I think that's only the default binding on Windows. So on Linux, it's something else. Something else doesn't work by default. So you have to set it.
Yeah, get PS readline key handler. and it's the
menu complete, I think, is the function. Yeah. Just set it to enter.
Just set it to enter. I don't think that would work.
That'd be fun.
Here, yeah, completion functions, menu complete. This is, I mean, the tooltips in particular are awesome. Like the fact that I can do, you know, get all the constructors for some weird type or whatever is all the overloads. It's really cool. So anyway, I think we're 3 minutes over. I have another call to join, so really appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this wasn't quite as painful now that we understand the permissions model here. My concern about no down level for native stuff extends to the Windows Server PM's enthusiasm for command line editor. Yeah, I get that too. Hopefully, you know, my hope is that as much of this stuff is done, I can't speak for other teams, but hopefully as much of this stuff is done in open source as possible, which means that, you know, even when we're not able to officially distribute something in down level operating systems, that people can take up the mantle, or those things are X-copyable or what have you. So I just know with the terminal, there are more technical problems there than simply, you know, having to distribute it down level, given the UWP and conpty stuff. So yeah. Oh, you're saying for non-Windows? I see. MS Administrator.
Yeah, so it's really up to Core Effects to support that on non-Windows completely for that to work. So you should open up an issue on their repo if it doesn't exist.
I think something with directory services, cross-platform. Oh, yep. This is the one. There you go.
You get you and your buddies to maybe thumbs up that, and that hopefully motivates them. I don't know.
Oop, there you go. Cool. Everyone have a great day, and hope to see a bunch at PSConf.eu, and those of you that aren't able to make it, we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, I'm gonna go to bye.